Hey, my friend, picture this. You're standing in your kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at your phone screen as the world you carefully built over the last decade crumbles in a single text message. Your hands are shaking. Your chest feels tight. And there's this voice in your head screaming, "How did I not see this coming?" Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody talks about. The moment that breaks you, it's probably already happened, or it's coming, and you're not ready for it. But what if I told you that the people who not only survive these moments, but actually become stronger because of them know something you don't? What if there's a way to stand in the middle of absolute chaos and find a stillness so deep that nothing, and I mean nothing, can shake you? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change how you face every single challenge for the rest of your life. Have you ever watched a building implode? You know, those controlled demolitions where they place explosives at specific points and the entire structure collapses inward in seconds. That's what it feels like when life decides it's time to restructure your reality. Maybe for you it was walking into your office on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, only to be called into a conference room where HR and your manager were already sitting. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Your career of 12 years ended in less time than it takes to make breakfast. Or perhaps it was the moment your partner looked at you across the dinner table and said, "We need to talk." And you just knew that everything was about to change. The relationship you'd invested 6 years of your life into was dissolving before the appetizer even arrived. Maybe it was the doctor's office, the way she closed the folder, the specific tone in her voice when she said, "I'm going to need you to sit down." That particular combination of words that separates your life into before and after. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly secure? I don't mean comfortable, I mean secure. That deep sense that your life was on solid ground and nothing unexpected could knock you off balance. If you're honest with yourself, that feeling is rarer than you think. Because here's what I've learned after speaking with hundreds of people who've been through hell and came out the other side. We're all walking on ground that's far less stable than we pretend it is. The bank account that feels secure today can evaporate in a market crash tomorrow. The body that feels strong and healthy today can betray you with a diagnosis next month. The person who promised forever can decide they're done next week. The company that seemed permanent can close its doors without warning. And this reality, it terrifies most people. So they spend enormous amounts of energy building walls, creating insurance policies, controlling every variable they possibly can, trying to eliminate uncertainty from an existence that is fundamentally uncertain. But there's another way, and the people who discover this way don't just survive crisis. They transform because of it. Chapter 1. The Prison of False Control. Let me take you to a place you've probably been before. It's a mental space where you believe, really believe, that if you just work hard enough, plan carefully enough, make all the right decisions, you can control the outcome of your life. This belief system is so deeply embedded in modern culture that questioning it feels almost heretical. We're taught from childhood that effort equals results, that good people get good outcomes, that if you follow the rules, life will reward you with stability and success. And then life laughs at these assumptions. Here's something that might sting a bit. Most of the anxiety you carry around isn't about what's actually happening. It's about the gap between what you think you should be able to control and what you actually can control. That gap, it's destroying your peace. Think about the last time you laid awake at 2 a.m., mind racing through scenarios. Were you thinking about what's actually happening right now? Or were you catastrophizing about 17 different futures, trying to plan for contingencies, attempting to control outcomes that haven't even occurred yet? I want you to consider something radical. What if 90% of what you're trying to control is completely outside your sphere of influence? What if all that mental and emotional energy you're burning trying to force reality to match your preferences is not just wasted, but actively making things worse? Let me tell you about Marcus. He was a software engineer at a startup in Austin. Smart guy. Worked 80-hour weeks for 3 years, sacrificed his health, his relationships, even missed his sister's wedding because of a product launch. He did everything right, according to the hustle culture playbook. The company got acquired. He got laid off. 2 weeks before his stock options would have vested. When I talked to him 6 months later, he said something that stuck with me. I spent 3 years trying to control the outcome. I couldn't control any of it. The only thing I actually had power over was how I showed up each day, and I missed that completely. Here's the liberating truth that most people discover only after crisis forces them to. There are exactly 3 things you can genuinely control: your thoughts, your actions, your responses. That's it. That's the list. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control other people's decisions. You cannot control accidents, illness, or death. You cannot control whether your efforts will produce the specific outcomes you desire. You cannot control timing. You cannot control other people's feelings about you. And when you really let this sink in, when you stop fighting this reality and start working with it, something miraculous happens. You become free. Free from the exhausting burden of trying to manage things that were never yours to manage. Free from the anxiety of thinking that if something goes wrong, it must be because you didn't control it well enough. Free to pour your energy into the places where it can actually make a difference. The ancient teachers, the ones who lived thousands of years before we had smartphones and deadlines and performance reviews, they understood something we've forgotten. You don't suffer because of what happens to you. You suffer because of what you tell yourself about what happens to you. That promotion you didn't get. The suffering doesn't come from the decision. It comes from the story you tell yourself about what that decision means, about your worth, your future, your capabilities. The relationship that ended, the pain doesn't come from the ending itself. It comes from your interpretation of what that ending says about your lovability, your future happiness, your wasted time. Can you see the difference? Events are neutral. Your judgment about events is what creates or eliminates suffering. Now, I can hear some of you pushing back. Are you saying I should just accept everything, not fight for what I want, just become passive? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. There's a massive difference between acceptance and passivity. Acceptance means you acknowledge reality as it is without wasting energy arguing with it. Passivity means you give up your power to respond. Let me give you an example. Say you get fired. Acceptance sounds like this: I have been let go from my job. This is what has happened. It's not what I wanted, but it's the current reality. Given this new reality, what are my options? What can I do from here? Resistance sounds like this. This shouldn't have happened. They had no right. This is so unfair. I can't believe this is happening to me. This ruins everything. My life is over. Feel the difference in energy between those two responses. The first one moves forward. The second one stays stuck. The calmest people you'll ever meet have trained themselves to recognize this distinction instantly. When something unexpected happens, they don't waste time in the resistance phase. They move straight to acceptance and then to strategic response. This is a skill. It's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill you can develop starting right now, today, with the next inconvenience that crosses your path. Stuck in traffic? Practice acceptance. This is the current situation. I cannot change it. What can I do with this time that's actually within my control? Someone criticizes you unfairly. Practice acceptance. They have formed this opinion. I cannot control their thoughts. What, if anything, do I want to do with this information? Your plans get canceled? Practice acceptance. The plan has changed. What opportunities might exist in this new situation? I know it sounds simple, almost too simple. But here's what happens when you practice this consistently. You build a mental muscle that knows how to differentiate between what you can influence and what you cannot. And that muscle becomes your greatest asset when real crisis hits. Because when you're standing in the wreckage of something important, when the ground is genuinely shifting beneath your feet, you won't waste precious energy fighting reality. You'll accept what is and immediately redirect your focus to what you can do about it. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And wisdom is what separates people who get destroyed by crisis from people who get forged by it. Chapter 2. The Truth About Permanence. Let me ask you something. What in your life right now feels permanent? Your job, your relationship, your health, your living situation, your friend group, your daily routine? Hold that thought for a moment while I tell you about a woman named Sarah. She was a competitive marathon runner, ran 5 days a week for 15 years. Her entire identity was wrapped up in running. She was the runner in her friend group. She meditated while running. She processed emotions while running. She solved problems while running. Then she tore her ACL in a freak accident playing soccer with her nephew. Surgery, months of physical therapy, and when she finally recovered, something had shifted. The passion was gone. Running no longer felt the same. She told me she felt like she'd lost herself. If I'm not a runner, who am I? Here's the trap Sarah fell into, and maybe you've fallen into it too. She mistook a temporary circumstance for a permanent identity. This is one of the most common sources of suffering during crisis. We take something that's happening right now, something that's always been temporary, and we treat it as if it defines who we are forever. I am unemployed. Not I'm currently between jobs, not I'm in a transition period. No, I am unemployed, as if unemployment is a permanent state of being rather than a temporary situation. I am alone, not I'm currently single, not I'm in a period of being by myself, but I am alone, as if being alone is your fixed destiny rather than your current circumstance. I am broken, not I'm going through a difficult healing process, not I'm recovering from trauma, but I am broken, as if brokenness is your permanent condition rather than a phase of transformation. Do you see how the language we use locks us into suffering? When you define yourself by temporary circumstances, you can't imagine a future where those circumstances have changed. And that inability to imagine a different future is what creates hopelessness. But here's the truth that's both unsettling and liberating. Nothing in your life is permanent, not one single thing. The pain you're feeling right now, temporary. The confusion, temporary. The sense of being lost, temporary. The financial struggle, temporary. The loneliness, temporary. The fear, temporary. But here's the beautiful paradox. While your problems are temporary, the strength you build by facing them becomes permanent. Every challenge you navigate successfully becomes part of your permanent psychological toolkit. The resilience you develop stays with you. The wisdom you gain remains available. The courage you discover becomes a lasting part of who you are. Think back over your own life for a moment. How many times have you faced something that felt overwhelming in the moment, only to look back later and realize it was actually a turning point? How many times did something that seemed like a disaster at the time actually open doors you didn't even know existed? I'm not suggesting you should minimize your current pain or pretend it doesn't matter. What I'm suggesting is that you hold your current situation lightly, knowing it's one chapter in a much longer story. When you can see your current crisis as temporary, you make better decisions. Panic makes terrible decisions because panic operates as if the current moment will last forever. Panic doesn't consider alternatives. Panic doesn't look for creative solutions. Panic just reacts to what appears to be permanent. But when you remember that everything is temporary, you can think strategically. You can ask yourself, 6 months from now, what decision will I be glad I made today? You can consider how your current actions will serve your long-term interest rather than just providing short-term relief. This understanding of impermanence also changes how you experience good times. If everything is temporary, including positive experiences, then you don't take them for granted. You savor them fully while they're here, without demanding they last forever. There's a lightness that comes from this. You can enjoy success without clinging to it desperately. You can appreciate relationships without suffocating them with neediness. You can celebrate accomplishments without making your entire identity dependent on them. The Buddhist teachers talk about this as holding things with an open palm rather than a closed fist. When your palm is open, things can rest there lightly. You can appreciate them fully. But when circumstances change, you don't have to pry your fingers open and suffer the loss. You were holding lightly all along. This applies to everything: your career, your relationships, your possessions, your body, your circumstances, even your identity. Who you are right now is not who you'll be in 5 years. The person you were 5 years ago is not who you are now. You're in constant motion, constantly evolving, constantly becoming something new. When you resist this natural flow, when you try to freeze yourself or your circumstances in place, you create suffering. But when you learn to move with the flow, to embrace change as the fundamental nature of existence, you develop a flexibility that makes you nearly unbreakable. Let me give you a practice you can start today. Every morning when you wake up, take a moment to notice 3 things that have changed since yesterday. Maybe the weather is different. Maybe your mood is slightly different. Maybe your body feels different. This simple practice trains your mind to notice impermanence. And when your mind becomes comfortable with constant change on a small scale, it's less likely to be devastated by change on a larger scale. Remember, the storm will pass. It always does. But the person you become by learning to stand steady in the center of the storm, that person remains with you forever. Chapter 3. Your Inner Fortress. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're inside a fortress. The walls are thick. The foundation is solid. Outside, a storm is raging. Wind is howling. Rain is pounding. Thunder is cracking across the sky. But inside the fortress, there's a room, a quiet room. And in that room, you sit in perfect stillness, completely untouched by the chaos outside. That fortress? It's not a fantasy. It's something you can build inside yourself. And once it's built, no external circumstance can destroy it. Most people spend their entire lives searching for peace in their external circumstances. They think they'll feel calm when they get the promotion, when they find the relationship, when they have enough money in the bank, when their health is perfect, when their family is happy. But this approach to peace is like building your house on sand. External circumstances are always shifting. The peace that depends on circumstances is not really peace at all. It's just temporary relief that can be shattered at any moment. Real peace, the kind that remains steady during crisis, comes from within. It comes from developing a relationship with a part of yourself that exists beyond your thoughts, beyond your emotions, beyond your circumstances. Let me explain this in a way that's practical, not mystical. You know how you can be aware of your own thoughts. Like right now, you're reading these words, but there's a part of you that's also observing yourself reading. That's what I'm talking about. There's the you that's experiencing things, having thoughts, feeling emotions. And then there's the you that's aware of all that happening, the observer, the witness. Most people are completely identified with their thoughts and emotions. When they feel anxious, they believe, I am anxious. When they feel sad, they believe, I am sad. When they think, I'm a failure, they believe that's truth rather than just a thought passing through. But when you develop access to the observer part of yourself, something shifts. You can notice your anxiety without being consumed by it. You can feel your sadness without believing it defines you. You can watch the thought, I'm a failure, pass through your mind without accepting it as reality. This creates space. And in that space, you find freedom. In that space, you can choose how to respond rather than simply reacting automatically. In that space, you find calmness, even in the midst of intense circumstances, because you're not completely identified with your temporary emotional states. Building this inner fortress requires practice. It starts with simply noticing. Notice when you're stressed. Not to judge yourself for being stressed, just to observe. Stress is present. My heart is racing. My breathing is shallow. My mind is spinning with worst-case scenarios. That's it. Just notice. When you notice without judgment, you've already created separation between you and the experience. You're no longer the stress. You're the awareness observing the stress. This might sound subtle, but it's profound. Because in that moment of observation, you've found the fortress. You've accessed the part of you that remains calm even when everything else is in turmoil. Let me give you a practical example. Say something stressful happens. Your immediate reaction might be panic. your thoughts might start spiraling. What am I going to do? This is terrible. Everything is falling apart. But if you've practiced accessing the observer, you can step back and notice. My mind is creating panic right now. My body is responding with physical sensations of fear. These are natural reactions to a stressful situation. Can you feel how different that is? In the first response, you are the panic. In the second response, you're the awareness, noticing the panic. The panic is still there, but you're not drowning in it. This practice becomes especially valuable when your mind starts catastrophizing about the future. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if everything gets worse? Instead of getting lost in those spirals, you can notice, my mind is creating future scenarios right now. These are stories about things that haven't happened yet. Right now, in this actual moment, I am breathing, I am aware, I am okay. This brings you back to the present moment, which is the only place where you actually have power. The inner fortress also involves what I call emotional independence. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached from others. It means your inner peace doesn't completely depend on other people's approval, behavior, or decisions. Think about how much of your emotional state is determined by other people, how they treat you, what they think of you, whether they're happy with you, whether they give you the response you want. When your sense of calm depends entirely on managing other people's reactions, you've given away your power to circumstances you cannot control. Emotional independence means you can remain centered even when others are upset. You can make decisions based on your own values rather than being swayed by every opinion. You can offer love and support without losing yourself in others' problems. This becomes your refuge. When everything around you is chaotic, when people are panicking, when the future is uncertain, you have this place within yourself where you can find stillness and clarity. From that place, you can think clearly, you can make wise decisions, you can take effective action, and here's something beautiful that happens. When you develop this inner fortress, you become a source of calm for others too. Your peace is contagious. People feel it. They're drawn to it. They find refuge in your presence because your stability isn't dependent on circumstances. Start building this fortress today. Take 3 conscious breaths. Notice your body. Notice your thoughts. Notice that you are the awareness observing all of this. That awareness is your fortress. And once you know how to access it, no storm can touch what's essential about you. Chapter 4. The Liberation of Letting Go. There's a word that makes most people uncomfortable. It's a word that sounds like defeat, like giving up, like waving a white flag in the face of adversity. That word is surrender. But what if I told you that surrender is actually one of the most powerful tools you have when everything falls apart? What if the act of letting go is what finally sets you free? Here's where most people get confused. They think surrendering means becoming passive. They think it means accepting that nothing can be done. They think it means rolling over and letting life crush them. But that's not what surrender means at all. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're swimming in the ocean and you get caught in a riptide. Your instinct is to fight against it, to swim as hard as you can toward the shore. And what happens? You exhaust yourself. You burn all your energy fighting a force that's stronger than you. And that's when people drown. But experienced swimmers know something different. They know you don't fight the riptide. You surrender to it. You let it carry you parallel to the shore until you're out of its grip. Then you swim back. That's the kind of surrender I'm talking about. Strategic surrender. Wise surrender. The kind that conserves your energy so you can use it where it actually matters. Think about what happens in your mind when something goes wrong. Your immediate response is usually some version of, "This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. This can't be real. I refuse to accept this." All of that resistance, it accomplishes absolutely nothing except making you suffer more. The situation has already occurred. Fighting against what's already happened is like arguing with yesterday's weather. You're not changing anything. You're just exhausting yourself. Real surrender means fully acknowledging what's actually happening right now without wasting energy wishing it were different. It doesn't mean you like what's happening. It doesn't mean you won't work to change what you can change. It simply means you stop fighting against the reality of what has already occurred. Let me give you two scenarios. Same situation, different responses. Scenario 1. You lose your job. Your internal response sounds like this. "This is a disaster. This is so unfair. They had no right. This shouldn't be happening. I can't handle this. My life is ruined. Everything is falling apart." Scenario 2. You lose your job. Your internal response sounds like this. "I have lost my job. This is what has happened. It's not what I wanted, but it is the current reality. Given that this is now the situation, what are my options? What can I do from here?" Can you feel the difference? The first response keeps you trapped in a cycle of resistance and victimization. The second response frees you to take productive action. The first response focuses on what you cannot change. The second response focuses on what you can influence from this point forward. Here's something that might surprise you. Surrender also applies to your own emotional responses. When something difficult happens, you will have emotional reactions. You might feel terrified, furious, heartbroken, or completely overwhelmed. And here's where people make a crucial mistake. They judge these emotions as signs of weakness. They try to suppress them, deny them, or talk themselves out of feeling them. But surrendering to your emotions doesn't mean wallowing in them or using them as an excuse for poor behavior. It means acknowledging them as natural human responses to difficult circumstances. When you stop fighting your emotions, something interesting happens. They move through you more quickly. Emotions that are fully felt and accepted tend to resolve naturally. Emotions that are resisted, judged, or pushed down get stuck and create ongoing psychological tension. I learned this the hard way during my own crisis. I spent months trying to be strong, trying to keep it together, trying to present this image of someone who had everything under control. And the more I fought my feelings, the worse they got. It wasn't until I finally let myself break down, let myself feel the full weight of what I was experiencing, that something shifted. The emotions I'd been so afraid of didn't destroy me. They washed through me like a wave, and when they receded, I found clarity on the other side. You can feel afraid and still take brave action. You can feel sad and still make wise decisions. You can feel angry and still respond with integrity. The emotions and the actions are separate. Surrendering to one doesn't mean abandoning the other. Surrender extends to uncertainty as well. And this is where it gets really uncomfortable for most people. The human mind craves certainty. It wants to know what's going to happen next. It wants guarantees. It wants a clear path forward. But crisis, by definition, involves uncertainty. The future is unclear. The outcome is unknown. The path forward is ambiguous. And fighting against this uncertainty is like fighting against gravity. It's a fundamental characteristic of existence that cannot be eliminated no matter how much you resist it. So what if, instead of exhausting yourself trying to eliminate uncertainty, you learned to become comfortable with not knowing? What if you developed what I call uncertainty tolerance? The ability to move forward and make decisions even when you don't have all the information you'd prefer to have. This skill is invaluable during crisis because crisis situations are inherently uncertain. The people who navigate them best aren't the ones who have all the answers. They're the ones who can act wisely despite not having all the answers. Let me tell you about David. He was a financial analyst who lost his job during a market crash. He spent the first 3 months trying to recreate his old life, sending out hundreds of applications for identical positions, refusing to consider anything different, fighting against the reality that his industry had fundamentally shifted. He was miserable, anxious, defeated. Then something clicked. He surrendered, not to failure, but to possibility. He stopped trying to force his life back into its old shape and started asking, what wants to emerge from this? He started exploring adjacent fields. He took on freelance projects he would have considered beneath him before. He talked to people in different industries. He followed curiosity instead of desperation. 6 months later, he'd created a consulting business that paid better than his old job and gave him flexibility he'd never had before. That transformation only became possible when he stopped fighting against what had happened and surrendered to what was emerging. Here's a practice you can start today. The next time something goes wrong, notice your first impulse to resist. Notice the voice that says, this shouldn't be happening. Then consciously choose a different response. Say to yourself, this is what's happening. I accept this reality completely. Now, what can I do about it? That simple shift, practiced consistently, will transform your relationship with difficulty. Because surrender doesn't make you weak. It makes you incredibly powerful. You're working with reality instead of against it. And that's where real change becomes possible. Chapter 5. Mastering Your Emotional Weather. Let's talk about something that nobody warns you about. When life falls apart, your emotional system goes into overdrive. And if you don't know how to work with that system, it can feel like you're being torn apart from the inside. Your emotions during crisis are like a flash flood. They come fast, they're intense, and they can sweep you away if you don't know what you're doing. But here's what I want you to understand. Being overwhelmed by your emotions is not a sign that you're broken. It's a normal human response to threat and uncertainty. The problem isn't that you have intense emotions. The problem is that most people were never taught how to work with intense emotions. So let's fix that right now. First, let's clear up a massive misconception. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing your emotions or pretending to feel differently than you actually feel. Emotional regulation means developing the ability to experience intense emotions without being completely controlled by them. It means creating enough space between you and your emotional reactions that you can choose how to respond rather than simply reacting on autopilot. Think of it this way. Your emotions are information. They're data points telling you something about your situation and your needs. Fear tells you that you perceive a threat and might need to take protective action. Anger tells you that something feels unjust and you might need to set boundaries. Sadness tells you that you lost something important and might need time to grieve. The problem happens when you either completely ignore this information or become so overwhelmed by it that you can't think clearly. Both extremes are problematic. Ignoring emotions leads to poor decisions because you're missing crucial information. Being overwhelmed by emotions also leads to poor decisions because you're reacting from panic instead of wisdom. The sweet spot is right in the middle. Feeling your emotions fully, listening to what they're telling you, and then making conscious choices about how to respond. Let me give you a technique that saved me countless times. It's called the stop method. S, stop what you're doing. T, take a breath. O, observe what you're feeling. P, proceed with awareness. Here's how it works in real life. Something stressful happens. You feel yourself starting to panic. Your thoughts start racing. Your body starts tensing up. That's when you stop. Literally pause whatever you're doing, even for just 10 seconds. Then you take a breath. Not just any breath. A deep, slow breath that activates your parasympathetic nervous system and naturally calms your body's stress response. Then you observe, not judge, just observe. I'm feeling scared right now. My heart is racing. My mind is creating worst-case scenarios. These are normal reactions to a stressful situation. Then you proceed, not from panic, but from conscious awareness. Given what I'm feeling and what's actually happening, what's the wisest response available to me right now? This process takes maybe 30 seconds, but it interrupts the automatic cycle between feeling and reacting. And in that interruption, you gain access to your higher thinking abilities instead of just your survival instincts. Another powerful technique is emotional labeling. When you're experiencing intense emotions, take a moment to identify and name what you're feeling as specifically as possible. Don't just say, "I feel terrible." Get specific. Are you feeling scared about the future? Angry about unfair treatment? Sad about what you've lost? Overwhelmed by too many demands? Lonely because you feel unsupported? This labeling process does something remarkable in your brain. It activates your prefrontal cortex, which naturally reduces the intensity of emotional reactions. It also helps you understand what your emotions are trying to tell you, which makes it easier to respond appropriately. If you're feeling scared, you might need to focus on creating safety or getting support. If you're feeling angry, you might need to address an injustice or set clearer boundaries. Now, let's talk about something crucial. Your body and mind are intimately connected. So caring for your physical state directly affects your emotional state. I know this sounds basic, but I cannot overstate how important this is during crisis. Sleep, exercise, nutrition. These aren't luxuries you can skip when you're dealing with difficult times. They're essentials. Sleep deprivation dramatically reduces your ability to regulate emotions. When you're running on 4 hours of sleep, everything feels worse than it actually is. Exercise helps metabolize stress hormones and releases mood-regulating chemicals in your brain. Even a 20-minute walk can shift your entire emotional state. Proper nutrition supports stable blood sugar levels, which affects your mood and emotional stability throughout the day. When you're living on coffee and stress, your emotional system is working with one hand tied behind its back. Here's something else that's crucial: understanding the difference between primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are your immediate, natural responses to situations. You feel afraid about losing your job. That's primary. Secondary emotions are your reactions to your primary emotions. You feel ashamed about feeling afraid. That's secondary. And here's the kicker: secondary emotions often cause more suffering than primary emotions because they involve judging your natural responses as wrong or inappropriate. During crisis, it's particularly important to practice self-compassion about your emotional reactions. You're dealing with difficult circumstances, and it's completely normal to have intense emotional responses. Judging yourself for having these responses only adds unnecessary suffering to an already challenging situation. Instead of thinking, "I shouldn't be this upset," or "I should be handling this better," try thinking, "Of course I'm upset. This is a genuinely difficult situation. Anyone in my position would feel this way." That shift from self-judgment to self-compassion creates space for your emotions to move through naturally instead of getting stuck in layers of shame and criticism. Let me give you a personal example. When I was going through my darkest period, I would wake up at 4 a.m. with this crushing anxiety in my chest. My first instinct was to judge myself. Why am I still anxious? I should be over this by now. What's wrong with me? That judgment made everything worse, the anxiety about being anxious. But when I learned to approach those moments with compassion, everything changed. Of course you're anxious. You're dealing with a lot right now. This is your nervous system trying to protect you. It's okay. You're okay. The anxiety didn't disappear, but my relationship with it transformed. It became something I could work with instead of something I had to fight. Create an emotional regulation plan before you need it. Identify the techniques that work best for you when you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe it's calling a supportive friend, taking a hot shower, going for a walk, practicing deep breathing, writing in a journal. Whatever works for you, have it ready. Having a clear plan removes the decision-making burden when you're already stressed and makes it more likely that you'll actually use effective coping strategies. Remember, the goal is not to eliminate difficult emotions during crisis. The goal is to experience them without being completely overwhelmed, to learn from the information they provide, and to respond from a place of wisdom rather than pure reaction. This ability will serve you not only during major crises, but in all the smaller challenges and stresses of daily life. Chapter 6. Finding Gold in the Rubble. Here's a question that might seem insensitive when you're in the middle of crisis. What if this breakdown is actually a breakthrough in disguise? I know. When everything is falling apart, the last thing you want to hear is someone suggesting there's a silver lining. Trust me, I get it. But stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. It's a genuine transformation that happens when you learn to see crisis through a different lens. Most people view crisis as something that happens to them, something external. something that disrupts their plans and destroys their security. Pure destruction with no redemption. But what if crisis is actually something that happens for you? What if the very circumstances that seem to be tearing your life apart are actually clearing space for something better to emerge? This perspective shift doesn't happen automatically. It requires conscious practice and a willingness to look beyond the immediate pain to see larger patterns and possibilities. Think about how many successful people have stories where crisis became a turning point. The startup founder who got fired from her corporate job and used that as the push to finally build her own company. The artist who went through a devastating breakup and created their most powerful work from that pain. The person who faced a health crisis and completely redesigned their life around what actually matters. This isn't about romanticizing suffering. Some crises are just crises, and the main task is to survive and heal. But more often than most people realize, what appears to be a disaster contains within it seeds of breakthrough, innovation, and transformation. The question is whether you have the vision to recognize these possibilities and the courage to act on them. Here's what crisis does that nothing else can. It strips away everything that isn't essential. When your normal routines and securities are disrupted, you're forced to examine what actually matters to you. Many people discover during crisis that they were spending enormous amounts of energy maintaining things that didn't truly serve their deepest values. The job that provided security but drained their soul. The relationship that looked good on the surface but prevented authentic connection. The lifestyle that impressed others but left them feeling empty. When these structures collapse, the initial experience is usually terror. You feel like you're losing everything. But as you learn to navigate the uncertainty, you often discover that what you're actually losing are the barriers that were preventing you from accessing your true potential. Crisis becomes a harsh but effective teacher that shows you where you've been settling for less than you deserve or avoiding challenges that would help you grow. Let me tell you about Rebecca. She was a corporate lawyer making ridiculous money but hating every minute of it. She'd been planning to quit for years but kept putting it off. The money, the prestige, the fear of starting over. Then she got seriously ill, hospitalized for 3 weeks. It forced her to stop completely. During that time, lying in a hospital bed, she had a clarity she'd never had before. If I survive this, I'm not going back to that life. She recovered. She quit. She trained as a yoga instructor, took a massive pay cut, and told me it was the best decision she ever made. Would she have made that change without the crisis? She doesn't think so. The illness gave her permission to finally do what she'd been too scared to do on her own. That's what I mean by crisis as catalyst. Sometimes life has to force the change because you won't initiate it yourself. Now, I'm not saying you should be grateful for traumatic experiences. I'm not suggesting you should seek out crisis. What I'm suggesting is this. When crisis does occur, and it will, remain open to the possibility that even the most challenging circumstances can become catalysts for positive change. This openness itself becomes a source of resilience because it helps you maintain hope and agency even when external circumstances seem hopeless. Here's a practice that can help. Start looking for small examples in your own past where something that initially seemed negative eventually led to positive changes. maybe a rejection that led you to a better opportunity, maybe a failure that taught you important lessons, maybe a loss that helped you appreciate what you still had. Building awareness of these patterns in your past helps you maintain perspective when facing current challenges. The transformation I'm talking about often involves discovering strengths and capabilities you didn't know you possessed. Many people live their entire lives without being truly tested. And while nobody wishes for crisis, there is something profoundly meaningful about discovering that you're capable of surviving and even thriving through experiences that once would have seemed impossible to endure. This discovery doesn't make you arrogant. It gives you a quiet confidence in your ability to handle whatever life might bring, not because you believe bad things won't happen again, but because you know that if difficult things do happen, you have the capacity to find ways through them. So when you're standing in the rubble of what used to be your life, take a moment to ask, what wants to emerge from this? What possibilities are becoming available now that old structures have been cleared away? You might not see the answers immediately. Growth and opportunity usually become visible only as you move through the experience and begin to integrate what you've learned. But by asking the question, you open yourself to transformation instead of just survival. And that makes all the difference. Chapter 7. The Courage to be Vulnerable. There's a lie most of us have been told about strength. We've been taught that being strong means having it all together, never showing weakness, never admitting you're struggling, never asking for help. And this lie? It's killing people's ability to navigate crisis effectively. Let me tell you what real strength looks like. Real strength looks like standing in front of someone you trust and saying, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm terrified, and I need help. That sentence, that takes more courage than pretending you've got everything under control. Here's what nobody tells you about vulnerability during crisis. It's not the opposite of strength. It's the foundation of it. Think about the last time you were really struggling. Did you tell people? Or did you put on a brave face and pretend everything was fine? Most people choose the mask. They show up to work with a smile, even though their world is crumbling at home. They post carefully curated photos on social media, even though they're barely holding it together. They respond to, "How are you?" with, "I'm fine," even though they're anything but fine. Why do we do this? Because somewhere along the way, we learned that showing weakness is dangerous, that admitting struggle makes us burdensome, that needing help makes us inadequate. But here's what actually happens when you maintain that facade. You cut yourself off from the very resources that could help you navigate your crisis more effectively. When you pretend to have everything under control, people can't offer support because they don't know you need it. When you refuse to admit you're struggling, you prevent others from sharing their own experiences that might help you. When you hide your fears and uncertainties, you miss opportunities to connect with people who might have faced similar challenges. The protective armor you think is keeping you safe is actually keeping you isolated. Let me share something personal. During the worst period of my life, I spent 6 months pretending I was okay. I showed up, I performed, I maintained appearances, and inside, I was dying. Then one night, I broke. I called my best friend at 2 a.m. and just fell apart. Told him everything, the fear, the shame, the feeling that I was completely failing at life. You know what he said? "Thank God you finally told me. I've been worried about you for months, but every time I asked, you said you were fine. I didn't know how to help you." That conversation changed everything. Not because he solved my problems, he couldn't, but because I stopped carrying the weight alone. That's what vulnerability does. It allows connection in places where isolation was creating unbearable suffering. Now, I'm not saying you should fall apart in front of everyone. Vulnerability requires discernment. You share deeply with people who've earned your trust. You practice appropriate boundaries. But within those trusted relationships, allowing yourself to be seen in your struggle is not weakness. It's wisdom. Vulnerability during crisis also means being honest about your limitations. Instead of trying to handle everything yourself, you acknowledge what you're genuinely capable of managing and what areas require additional support. This honest assessment allows you to allocate your energy more effectively and prevents the burnout that comes from trying to do more than is humanly possible. Here's something interesting that happens when you allow yourself to be vulnerable. Your relationships become deeper and more meaningful. People often want to help, but don't know how to offer support to someone who appears to have everything together. When you're vulnerable about your struggles, you give others permission to show up for you, and in many cases, people will surprise you. The support will come from unexpected places. People you barely knew will step up in profound ways, and some people you expected to be there might disappoint you. That information, it's valuable. It shows you who your real support system is. Vulnerability also includes being open about not having all the answers. One of the most stressful aspects of crisis is the pressure to know what to do next, to have a clear plan, to be certain about decisions that will affect your future. But crisis, by definition, involves entering unknown territory where your previous strategies might not apply. Admitting, "I don't know what to do next," is not failure, it's honesty. And from that honest place, you can begin to explore options, gather information, seek advice, and experiment with different approaches. When you're pretending to know what you're doing, you're less likely to remain open to new information or alternative solutions that might be more effective than your original plans. Let me give you a practice. This week, try being 10% more honest about what you're actually experiencing. Not dramatically more, just 10%. Instead of "I'm fine" when someone asks how you are, try "Honestly, I'm having a tough week." Instead of pretending you have it all figured out, try "I'm still figuring this out and it's uncomfortable." Instead of hiding your struggles, try sharing them with one trusted person. Notice what happens. You'll probably be surprised by how much relief you feel and how much support becomes available when you stop pretending to be invulnerable. Remember, vulnerability is not the same as helplessness. Vulnerable strength means being open about what you're experiencing while still taking appropriate action to address your situation. It means feeling your fears while still moving forward with courage. It means admitting your limitations while still using whatever resources and capabilities you do have available. That's not weakness. That's profound strength. Chapter 8. Building Anchors in Shifting Sands. When the external world is chaos, you need something to hold on to, something stable, something reliable. The mistake most people make? They abandon their routines and self-care practices during crisis, thinking they don't have time for such things when their world is falling apart. But this is exactly backwards. During stable times, you can afford to be inconsistent with your daily practices because your external circumstances provide structure. During unstable times, your internal practices become even more crucial because they may be the only source of consistency available. Think of these practices as anchors. When the storm is raging and the waters are rough, anchors are what keep you from drifting into dangerous territory. Let me ask you something. What does your morning look like when you're in crisis mode? For most people, it's chaos. They wake up already anxious, immediately check their phone for bad news, start ruminating about all their problems before they even get out of bed, skip breakfast, rush through their day in a state of perpetual stress. Now, imagine a different morning. You wake up, and before you check your phone, you take 5 conscious breaths. You spend 10 minutes sitting quietly, just being present. You move your body for even 15 minutes. You eat something nourishing. You set an intention for the day. Same external circumstances, completely different internal state. That's the power of anchoring practices. I'm not talking about elaborate routines that require hours. I'm talking about small, consistent practices that ground you and provide structure when everything else feels unstable. A morning practice that centers you, an evening practice that helps you process the day and prepare for rest, movement that helps regulate your nervous system, consistent sleep and meal times that support your body's natural rhythms. These don't have to be perfect. It's better to do something small every day than something elaborate occasionally. Here's what I do, and you can adapt this to what works for you. Every morning before I look at my phone, I sit for 10 minutes. Sometimes I meditate, sometimes I just breathe, sometimes I sit in silence and notice what I'm feeling. That's it, 10 minutes. But those 10 minutes set the tone for my entire day. They remind me that I have agency over my internal state even when I don't have control over external circumstances. Then throughout the day, I take what I call anchor moments, little pauses where I reconnect with my breath, with my body, with the present moment. Maybe it's one conscious breath before a difficult conversation. Maybe it's a 2-minute walk around a block. Maybe it's just noticing my feet on the ground and reminding myself that right here, right now, I'm okay. These micro practices accumulate. They build a foundation of stability that supports you when everything else is uncertain. Physical spaces can also provide stability during unstable times. Even if your living situation has changed or your financial circumstances have shifted, you can create small areas of order and beauty that provide comfort. This might be as simple as keeping your bedroom neat and adding a few items that bring you joy, or creating a small corner where you can sit quietly and reflect. Your physical environment affects your mental state more than you realize. When external chaos is high, having at least one space that feels calm and ordered can provide psychological relief. It doesn't have to be perfect or expensive. It just needs to feel like a refuge. Relationships are another crucial anchor during unstable times. Crisis can be isolating, especially if your situation is unusual or difficult for others to understand. But even during the most challenging times, there are usually people who care about your well-being and want to offer support. Make consistent effort to stay connected with these supportive relationships, even if it's just brief check-ins or simple messages letting people know how you're doing. These connections remind you that you're not alone and provide sources of encouragement when your own inner resources feel depleted. Now let's talk about financial anchors, because this becomes particularly important during crisis. Even if your income has been reduced or eliminated, maintaining whatever financial practices you can helps provide a sense of agency and forward movement. This might mean tracking your expenses carefully, looking for small ways to reduce costs, setting aside even tiny amounts of money when possible. The psychological benefit extends beyond the practical advantages. It provides a sense that you're taking care of your future self, that you haven't given up on recovery and growth. Creating intellectual and creative anchors is also important. Continue reading, learning, or engaging in creative activities that feed your mind and spirit. These activities provide continuity with who you are beyond your current circumstances. They remind you that you're still growing and developing as a person, even while dealing with major challenges. Set small, achievable goals that are within your control and celebrate when you accomplish them. Maybe it's reading one chapter of a book each day, writing a page in a journal, learning something new online. These accomplishments provide evidence that you're still capable of growth and achievement even during difficult times. Here's something crucial. Creating stability doesn't mean eliminating all uncertainty or solving all your problems immediately. It means building a foundation of consistent practices and reliable resources that support you while you navigate uncertainty and work toward solutions. This foundation becomes the platform from which you can take effective action and make wise decisions about your future. The stability you create during crisis also prepares you for the opportunities and challenges that will emerge as your situation improves. The habits you maintain during difficult times become strengths you can build upon when circumstances become more favorable. Let me give you an assignment. Choose 3 anchoring practices you'll commit to for the next week. Make them small enough that you know you can do them even on your worst days. Maybe it's 3 conscious breaths when you wake up, a 10-minute walk at lunch, 5 minutes of journaling before bed. Whatever you choose, do them consistently. Notice how these small anchors of stability affect your ability to navigate uncertainty. Because when everything external is shifting, these internal anchors become your lifeline. Chapter 9. The Power of Now. Here's something that might sting a little. Most of your suffering during crisis isn't about what's actually happening right now. It's about the stories your mind is telling about the past and the future. Think about the last time you were really anxious. Were you anxious about what was happening in that exact moment? Or were you anxious about 17 different scenarios that might happen tomorrow, next week, next month? The human mind has this incredible ability to time travel. It can replay the past endlessly. It can project into the future and create elaborate simulations of things that haven't happened yet. And while this ability can be useful for learning from experience and planning ahead, it becomes a source of tremendous suffering when it's operating on autopilot. Because here's the truth. The present moment is usually much more manageable than the stories your mind tells about it. Right now, in this exact moment, as you're reading these words, are you okay? Not, is your life perfect? Not, are all your problems solved? But right now, in this breath, are you surviving? You are. You're here. You're aware. You're breathing. Whatever challenges you're facing in this immediate moment, you're handling them. This doesn't mean the present moment is always pleasant during crisis. You might be feeling fear, sadness, anger, or confusion right here, right now. But even difficult emotions are more manageable when experienced directly, rather than amplified by mental stories. Fear about what's happening right now is different from fear about all the things that might happen in the future. Sadness about what you're actually experiencing right now is different from sadness about all the implications your mind has invented. Developing present moment awareness during crisis is not about positive thinking. It's about training your attention to focus on what's actually happening rather than getting lost in mental simulations. This focused attention is where you find both peace and power, because the present moment is where life actually occurs and where effective action becomes possible. Let me give you a practical technique. It's called anchoring to sensation. Your body is always in the present moment. So when your mind starts spinning into worry about the future or regret about the past, you can bring yourself back to now by focusing on physical sensation. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the sensation of your breath moving in and out. Feel the texture of whatever you're touching. Notice sounds around you without judging them. This isn't about making everything perfect. It's about coming back to what's real, what's actual, what's here. I use this constantly. When I notice my mind catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong, I stop and ask myself, what's actually happening right now in this moment? Usually the answer is much less dramatic than what my mind was creating. Right now, I'm sitting in a chair, I'm breathing, I'm okay. That doesn't solve my external problems, but it interrupts the mental spiral that was making everything worse. Present moment awareness also helps you notice and appreciate whatever positive elements exist in your current situation. Even during the most difficult times, there are usually some aspects of your experience that are neutral or even pleasant. The warmth of sunlight, the taste of coffee, a kind word from a friend, a moment of laughter. These aren't insignificant during crisis. They're reminders that life includes more than just your problems. They provide relief from stress and help maintain your connection to joy. But you can only notice them when your attention is present, rather than lost in mental stories about your troubles. Here's a practice you can do right now. Set a timer for 1 minute. For that minute, bring your full attention to your breath. Notice the sensation of air moving in and out. When your mind wanders to thoughts about the past or future, gently bring it back to the breath. Just 1 minute. That's all. Notice how you feel after that minute compared to before. Probably a bit calmer, a bit more centered, maybe just a tiny bit more peaceful. That's the power of present moment awareness, and you can access it anytime, anywhere, regardless of what's happening in your external circumstances. As your capacity for present moment awareness grows, you'll discover that it becomes a reliable refuge during emotional storms. No matter what's happening in your life, you can always return to the present moment and find some measure of peace and clarity there. This doesn't solve your external problems, but it provides the mental and emotional stability necessary for addressing them wisely. When you're truly present, you're not seeing your situation through the lens of past disappointments or future fears. You're seeing what's actually happening right now, and that clearer seeing leads to better decisions. You can also access your intuition and inner wisdom more easily when your mind isn't scattered across time. Wisdom doesn't come from anxious mental spinning. It comes from quiet presence. This present-centered approach to crisis doesn't mean you won't plan for the future or learn from the past. It means you'll do these activities from a centered, aware state rather than from anxiety and reactivity. Planning that arises from present moment awareness is more creative and realistic. Learning that occurs from present moment reflection is more useful and less self-punishing. Start building this capacity today, one conscious breath at a time, one moment of full presence at a time, one return to now at a time. Because the present moment is not just where peace lives, it's where your power lives too. And when everything external is uncertain, that power is exactly what you need. Chapter 10. Rising from the Ashes. So you've learned to stay calm in the storm. You've developed emotional regulation skills. You've found meaning in your struggle. And now comes the part that many people find most challenging: rebuilding. This is the phase where you take everything you've learned and start constructing a new life from whatever remains after the disruption. And here's what nobody tells you. Rebuilding is both harder and more liberating than you expect. It's harder because you're still dealing with ongoing challenges, uncertainty, and emotional ups and downs while simultaneously trying to make decisions about your future direction. You're renovating the house while you're still living in it. But it's liberating because crisis often gives you something precious: permission to rebuild more intentionally than you built the first time. Think about it. When you're young and just starting out, you often make choices based on limited information, external expectations, or assumptions you later discover don't align with your authentic values. You take the job because it pays well, even though it drains your soul. You move to the city because that's where ambitious people go, even though you crave nature and quiet. You build a lifestyle that looks successful from the outside, even though it feels empty from the inside. But when you're rebuilding after crisis, you have the advantage of experience, self-knowledge, and clarity about what truly matters. The foundation collapsed, and now you get to ask, what do I actually want to build here? Let me tell you about Marcus. He spent 15 years building a career in corporate law, made partner at a prestigious firm, had the title, the salary, the corner office. From the outside, he'd made it. Then he had a heart attack at 42, survived, but it shook him to his core. During his recovery, he had time to think, really think, and he realized he'd been building someone else's dream, his parents' dream, society's dream, not his dream. He made a choice that everyone thought was crazy. He left the firm, took a massive pay cut, started teaching high school civics. 5 years later, he told me it was like being released from prison. I was so busy climbing the ladder that I never stopped to ask if it was leaning against the right wall. That's what rebuilding after crisis can do. It gives you clarity about which walls are worth climbing. So let's talk about how to rebuild intentionally, instead of just recreating your old life in slightly different packaging. First, you need to get brutally honest with yourself. What aspects of your previous life were genuinely fulfilling? What aspects were you maintaining out of habit, obligation, or fear? This requires courage because it often reveals that you were living in ways that weren't fully authentic or satisfying. And it's tempting to blame external circumstances or other people's expectations for your choices. But here's the truth. Taking full responsibility for your choices, both past and future, is essential for creating a life that truly reflects who you are and what you want. Nobody forced you to stay in that soul-crushing job. Nobody forced you to maintain that exhausting lifestyle. You made those choices for reasons that made sense at the time. And now? Now you get to make different choices. The rebuilding process requires what I call strategic patience. This means working diligently toward your goals while accepting that meaningful reconstruction takes time. You can't rush healing without risking re-injury. You can't force psychological rebuilding without risking creating new problems or repeating old patterns. Strategic patience involves breaking down large rebuilding goals into smaller, manageable steps that you can work on consistently over time. Instead of trying to solve all your problems at once or recreate your entire life immediately, you focus on making steady progress in key areas while allowing your overall vision to evolve as you learn and grow. Let's talk about financial rebuilding, because this often requires particular attention. If your crisis involved job loss, business failure, divorce, or other financially disruptive events, the temptation is to focus exclusively on replacing lost income as quickly as possible. And yes, you need to handle immediate survival needs, but don't let financial pressure force you into recreating the same patterns that weren't serving you before. A more strategic approach balances immediate survival needs with longer-term goals for creating work that's both financially sustainable and personally meaningful. Maybe that means taking a temporary position to meet basic expenses while simultaneously developing skills or pursuing opportunities that align more closely with your authentic interests and values. Or maybe it means living more simply than you did before so you can pursue work that pays less but fulfills you more. There's no single right answer. The question is, what serves your long-term well-being, not just your short-term comfort or external image? Relationship rebuilding is another crucial aspect. Crisis reveals which relationships are truly supportive and which are based on superficial factors like convenience, habit, or mutual dependency. Some relationships may have been damaged during your crisis, either because of stress and difficult behavior or because others couldn't understand or support what you were going through. This is where you need both forgiveness and discernment. Forgiveness for others who disappointed you during your difficult time, and forgiveness for yourself if you weren't at your best in some interactions. But forgiveness doesn't mean automatically returning all relationships to their previous status. Some relationships may need new boundaries. Some may need to be rebuilt on different foundations. Some may need to be released entirely to make space for healthier connections. The rebuilding phase is also an opportunity to develop new relationships with people who understand and appreciate who you're becoming rather than who you used to be. Join groups related to your new interests. Seek mentors who've navigated similar transitions. Be intentional about the kind of people you want to spend time with. Physical and health rebuilding often requires attention too. Crisis and stress take tolls on physical health, and the rebuilding phase is an ideal time to establish healthier habits. This doesn't require dramatic lifestyle changes or expensive interventions. Often, simple consistencies around sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management create foundations for improved energy, mood, and resilience. The emotional and psychological aspects of rebuilding involve integrating the lessons and growth that have emerged from your crisis experience. This means allowing the wisdom you've gained to influence your future choices, rather than simply trying to return to your previous way of operating. You're not the same person who entered the crisis. Your rebuilt life should reflect the growth and changes that have occurred. Develop new personal practices that support your ongoing well-being. Maybe it's regular time for reflection or meditation. Maybe it's creative pursuits that were neglected in your previous life. Maybe it's commitments to learning, service, or adventure that honor the expanded sense of what's possible. Here's something crucial to understand. Rebuilding is not about creating a perfect life that will never face challenges again. It's about creating a life that's more aligned with your authentic self, more resilient in the face of future difficulties, and more satisfying in terms of meaning and fulfillment. The life you rebuild after crisis often becomes more beautiful and fulfilling than the life that was disrupted. Not because crisis is good, but because the rebuilding process allows you to apply wisdom and intention that wasn't available the first time around. So, as you rebuild, keep asking yourself, am I recreating my old life, or am I creating something new and more authentic? Because crisis gives you permission to build differently. Don't waste that opportunity. Chapter 11. The Wisdom Only Fire Can Forge. There are certain truths you can only learn by walking through fire. Certain wisdom that can only be forged in the heat of real crisis. This isn't intellectual understanding you get from reading books or listening to podcasts. This is bone deep, knowing that changes who you are at a fundamental level. And this wisdom, it's the hidden gift that emerges when you learn to stay calm while everything falls apart. The first piece of wisdom that gets forged in crisis, a deep understanding of your own resilience. Before facing significant challenges, most people have only theoretical knowledge of their capacity to handle difficulty. They might believe they're strong or fragile, but they don't really know until they're tested. But when you've actually survived something you weren't sure you could survive, when you've found ways forward when the path wasn't clear, when you've discovered inner resources you didn't know existed, that changes everything. You develop this quiet, unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever life might bring. Not arrogance, not invulnerability, just a knowing that you've been tested and found to be more capable than you previously believed, that while you cannot prevent future difficulties, you have what it takes to meet them with wisdom and courage. This inner knowing changes how you approach all of life's challenges. You're no longer operating from fear of your own inadequacy. Another profound wisdom, clarity about what actually matters versus what you thought mattered before you were tested. Crisis strips away everything that isn't essential, and in that stripping away, you see clearly what deserves your time, energy, and attention. Many people spend decades pursuing goals, accumulating possessions, seeking recognition, or maintaining relationships that provide little real satisfaction. But when you face the possibility of losing everything, you understand viscerally the difference between what's truly important and what's just important to your ego. This understanding isn't intellectual, it's felt, and it guides your future choices in ways that create more authentic fulfillment. You also gain wisdom about the temporary nature of all circumstances. When you've lived through having your world turned completely upside down, you understand that no external situation is permanent. This brings both humility during good times and hope during difficult times. You can enjoy success without clinging desperately because you know it will change. You can endure hardship without despair because you know it's not a permanent state. This leads to what ancient traditions call equanimity, the ability to remain balanced regardless of whether circumstances are favorable or challenging. Not indifference, not emotional flatness, but a centered presence that can fully experience whatever life brings while knowing all conditions are temporary. Crisis also teaches profound lessons about control and acceptance. Before significant challenges, most people live with the illusion that they have much more control than they actually do. Crisis reveals the limits of personal control in ways that initially feel terrifying, but ultimately become liberating. When you truly understand what you can and cannot control, you stop wasting energy on futile attempts and focus where you can actually make a difference. This wisdom leads to a more skillful relationship with effort and outcome. You give your best effort while holding results lightly. You work diligently toward goals without being devastated if things don't unfold exactly as hoped. The experience of receiving help during crisis often provides wisdom about interdependence that transforms how you relate to others. Many people pride themselves on independence and self-reliance, but crisis reveals these qualities, while valuable, are incomplete. Everyone needs help sometimes. Everyone benefits from community and support. Recognizing this doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And this understanding often leads to greater generosity toward others who are struggling. When you've been in need yourself, you naturally become more understanding and willing to offer support. The empathy gained through personal struggle becomes a gift you can offer others facing similar challenges. Crisis wisdom also includes deeper appreciation for simple pleasures and ordinary experiences that might have been taken for granted before. When you face the possibility of losing what matters most, ordinary moments become extraordinary. The taste of food, the feeling of safety, the comfort of a friend's presence, the simple fact of being alive. This appreciation isn't sentimentality or forced gratitude. It's a natural result of understanding how precious and fragile the basic conditions of well-being actually are. Perhaps the deepest wisdom, understanding your own fundamental okayness, regardless of external circumstances. When you've been stripped of external factors you thought defined your worth, when you've faced your own limitations and failures directly, when you've survived everything falling apart, you often discover something profound. Your essential self remains intact and valuable, despite all losses and changes. This recognition of your intrinsic worth, independent of achievements, possessions, relationships, or circumstances, provides a foundation that cannot be shaken by future challenges. You no longer need to prove your value through external accomplishments. You know that you're fundamentally okay, and this knowing becomes an unshakable source of confidence and calm. The wisdom gained through crisis also includes practical knowledge about navigating difficulty more skillfully in the future. You've learned which coping strategies actually help and which create additional problems. You've discovered which relationships provide genuine support. You've identified your early warning signs of overwhelm and developed techniques for addressing stress before it becomes unmanageable. This practical wisdom makes you more resilient, not because you won't face future challenges, but because you'll face them with better tools, clearer perspectives, and greater confidence. Each crisis you navigate successfully adds to your arsenal of knowledge and skills, making you increasingly capable of helping not only yourself, but others who face similar difficulties. And that's perhaps the most beautiful transformation. You don't just survive. You become someone who can help others survive too. Chapter 12. The Unshakable Core. After traveling through the depths of crisis and emerging with newfound wisdom and strength, you arrive at something remarkable, a state that can best be described as being unshakable, not rigid, not invulnerable, not emotionally numb, but flexibly strong, centered, responsive to life while remaining grounded in something that external circumstances cannot touch. Being unshakable doesn't mean you never face difficulties or never experience intense emotions. It means you've developed the capacity to face uncertainty, loss, and challenge without being fundamentally destabilized. You can feel fear without being paralyzed, experience sadness without being consumed, face uncertainty without being overwhelmed by anxiety. Your emotional responses are natural and appropriate, but they don't define or control your essential state of being. This quality emerges naturally from having successfully navigated crisis with wisdom and grace. It's not something you achieve by trying to be unshakable. It develops organically when you've repeatedly discovered that you can handle whatever life brings, that you can find meaning and growth even in difficult experiences, that your essential self remains intact regardless of external circumstances. Being unshakable also means you've developed what I call responsibility, the ability to choose your response to any situation rather than simply reacting automatically. This doesn't mean your responses are cold or calculated. It means they arise from a centered place of wisdom rather than a reactive place of fear. This is perhaps the greatest freedom available to human beings. External circumstances will always be largely outside your control. Other people will make their own choices. Events will unfold according to complex factors you cannot predict. But your response to all of these factors remains within your domain of choice. And the quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your responses. The unshakable person has also learned to locate their security internally rather than externally. Their sense of well-being doesn't come from having perfect circumstances. It comes from their relationship with themselves, their values, their inner resources, and their connection to what they consider meaningful. This internal security develops through repeatedly discovering that you can maintain your essential well-being even when external conditions are difficult. Each time you navigate challenge successfully while maintaining your integrity and inner peace, you build evidence that your security comes from within. The unshakable quality also includes deep acceptance of life's fundamental uncertainty. Most people spend enormous energy trying to create certainty and predictability, and they suffer when these efforts inevitably fall short. But you've made peace with uncertainty as a basic characteristic of existence. You can make plans and work toward goals while remaining flexible when circumstances require adaptation. This acceptance doesn't make you passive. It makes you more effective because you're not wasting energy fighting against basic conditions of life. Being unshakable also involves having developed long-term perspective. When you understand that all circumstances are temporary, that your life includes cycles of difficulty and ease, you can navigate each phase without losing perspective about the larger journey. You can fully experience and appreciate positive developments while holding them lightly. You can fully acknowledge and address difficulties without losing hope. Perhaps most importantly, being unshakable includes having developed genuine compassion for yourself and others. This compassion arises from understanding that everyone is doing their best with their current level of consciousness and capacity, that everyone faces challenges and struggles, that everyone deserves kindness, especially during difficult times. This compassion makes you unshakable, not through hardness, but through open-hearted strength that can remain present with suffering without being destroyed by it. You can witness others' pain without taking it on as your own. You can offer support without losing your balance. You can acknowledge your own mistakes without harsh self-judgment. The unshakable presence you develop becomes a gift not only to yourself, but to everyone around you. In a world where many people are reactive, anxious, and driven by external circumstances, your centered presence provides a stabilizing influence that helps others access their own calm and wisdom. You become a reminder that it's possible to face life's challenges with grace, dignity, and inner peace. This is the ultimate reward for learning to navigate crisis with wisdom. You don't just survive difficult times. You become someone who can help others survive them as well. You discover that the very experiences that once threatened to destroy you have instead forged you into someone capable of extraordinary calm, wisdom, and strength. The journey from being overwhelmed by crisis to becoming unshakable is one of the most profound transformations available. It's a journey nobody chooses voluntarily, but it offers gifts that cannot be obtained any other way. When life falls apart and you learn to remain calm in the center of the storm, you discover not just how to survive difficulty, but how to transform difficulty into wisdom, strength, and unshakable peace. Chapter 13. Designing Your New Life. You've survived the storm. You've learned to stay calm in the chaos. You've discovered wisdom you didn't know existed. And now comes the most exciting part. Designing a life that actually reflects who you've become. Not who you were before the crisis. Not who other people think you should be, but who you authentically are now, forged by fire and transformed by challenge. This is where most people make a critical mistake. They rush to recreate the external appearance of their old life without examining whether that life was actually serving them. They replace the job they lost with an identical job at a different company. They jump into a new relationship that mirrors the patterns of the one that ended. They rebuild the same lifestyle that was exhausting them before. And then they wonder why they still feel empty unfulfilled or out of alignment. Here's what I want you to understand. Crisis gave you something incredibly valuable. It gave you a blank canvas. The structures that were limiting you have collapsed. The expectations that were constraining you have been disrupted. The patterns that were keeping you stuck have been broken. You have permission now to build something different. Don't waste it by simply repainting the same old picture. Let me tell you about Jennifer. She was a marketing executive at a tech company in San Francisco. 6-figure salary, impressive title, 90-hour work weeks. Burnout so severe she was having panic attacks in the bathroom between meetings. Then the company laid off her entire department. She was devastated, terrified. Her identity was completely wrapped up in that career. But during her unemployment, something unexpected happened. She started painting again, something she'd loved in college but abandoned as impractical when she entered the corporate world. At first, it was just therapy, a way to process her emotions. But as weeks turned into months, she realized something. She was happier painting in her apartment than she'd been in years of corporate success. When job offers finally came, she made a choice that shocked everyone who knew her. She turned them down. Instead, she took a part-time position doing freelance marketing that paid a fraction of her old salary, and used the rest of her time to pursue art. 3 years later, she's showing in galleries, not making millions, but making enough. And for the first time in her adult life, she's genuinely happy. That transformation only became possible because she didn't rush to recreate her old life. She gave herself permission to explore what wanted to emerge. So let's talk about how to design a life that actually serves you. First, you need to get clear on your values, not your parents' values, not society's values, yours. What actually matters to you: connection, creativity, freedom, security, adventure, service, growth, impact. There's no right answer. The question is, what's true for you? And here's the important part. Your values may have shifted during your crisis. Things that seemed important before might feel trivial now. Things you dismissed as unimportant might feel essential. Honor that shift. It's not regression, it's evolution. Once you're clear on your values, you can start making decisions that align with them. Career decisions, relationship decisions, lifestyle decisions, financial decisions. Instead of asking, what will make me look successful? Ask, what aligns with my deepest values? Instead of asking, what will other people approve of? Ask, what feels authentic and true for me? This requires courage because you'll probably make choices that confuse or disappoint people who knew the old you. Some people will question your decisions. Some will think you're making mistakes. Some will project their own fears and limitations onto your choices. Let them. You're not living your life for their approval. You're living it for your own fulfillment. Let's talk about work, because this is often where people feel most trapped. You need money. You have bills. You can't just follow your passion if your passion doesn't pay. I get it. Practical concerns are real, but there's often more flexibility than people realize. You don't have to choose between soul-crushing work that pays well and fulfilling work that leaves you starving. There are creative solutions in the middle. Part-time work that covers expenses while you build something more meaningful. Skills from your old career that can be applied in new contexts. Ways to simplify your lifestyle so you need less money. The question is, are you willing to explore those possibilities? Or are you so attached to a certain lifestyle, a certain image, a certain level of external success that you'll sacrifice your well-being to maintain it? Only you can answer that. Relationships need examination too. Crisis reveals which relationships are based on genuine connection and which are based on convenience, habit, or mutual benefit. As you design your new life, be intentional about the relationships you cultivate. Seek people who support your authentic self, not people who preferred the old version of you that fit their expectations. This doesn't mean abandoning everyone from your past. It means having honest conversations about how you've changed and what you need now. Some relationships will adapt and deepen. Some will fade naturally. Some may need to end consciously. All of that is okay. Relationships are meant to evolve as people evolve. Physical environment matters too. Where you live, how you live, the spaces you inhabit daily, all of this affects your well-being more than you probably realize. If your crisis involved relocation or financial changes, don't just settle for whatever's convenient. Think about what kind of environment supports the life you're trying to create. Do you need more nature, more community, more space, more simplicity? You may not be able to create your ideal environment immediately, but you can move toward it intentionally. Creating your new life also means establishing boundaries that protect your energy and well-being. One of the gifts of crisis is clarity about what drains you and what energizes you. Honor that knowledge by saying no to what depletes you and yes to what sustains you. This might mean declining invitations that don't align with your values, setting limits on work commitments, reducing time with people who leave you feeling worse, creating space for activities that feed your soul. People pleasers find this incredibly difficult. If you're used to saying yes to everything, setting boundaries feels selfish or mean. But boundaries aren't selfish. They're self-preserving, and you cannot give to others from an empty cup. Here's what I want you to remember as you design your new life. This is not about achieving perfection. It's about creating alignment. Alignment between your values and your choices, between your authentic self and your external life, between who you are and how you live. That alignment is where peace lives, where fulfillment lives, where sustainable well-being lives. You've been given a rare opportunity, the chance to rebuild from the ground up with wisdom you didn't have before. Don't waste it recreating a life that wasn't serving you. Build something new, something authentic, something that honors who you've become through surviving the fire. Chapter 14, Passing the Torch. There's a final transformation that happens when you've truly learned to stay calm when life falls apart. You stop being just a survivor of crisis. You become a guide for others still in the storm. And this shift? It's one of the most meaningful things that can emerge from your suffering. Think about it. Who do you trust more when you're going through hell? Someone who's read about difficulty in books? Or someone who's actually been there, survived it, and emerged stronger? Your experience has given you something invaluable: credibility, empathy, practical wisdom, and the ability to say, "I know how this feels," with genuine understanding. This doesn't mean you need to become a therapist or life coach. It doesn't mean you need to make helping others your full-time job. It simply means you have something to offer people facing challenges similar to what you've faced. Maybe it's a friend going through a divorce when you've navigated one yourself. Maybe it's a colleague dealing with job loss when you've rebuilt a career from scratch. Maybe it's someone facing a health crisis when you've battled your own. Your presence, your story, your survival. These become sources of hope for people who aren't sure they can make it through. Let me tell you about Thomas. He went through bankruptcy, foreclosure, and divorce in the same year, lost everything, spent 6 months sleeping on his brother's couch, questioning whether life was worth living, but he climbed out, rebuilt, found stability again. Years later, a friend of a friend reached out to him. Same situation. Financial collapse. Family falling apart. Suicidal ideation. Thomas spent hours on the phone with this stranger, not giving advice, not offering solutions, just sharing his own story, being present, offering the only thing that matters when you're in that dark place. Proof that survival is possible. That stranger, still alive today, told Thomas that conversation saved his life. That's the power of passing the torch. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be fully healed. You don't need to have achieved perfect peace. You just need to be a few steps ahead on the path and willing to look back and extend a hand to someone still climbing. This becomes part of how you create meaning from your suffering. The pain you went through wasn't meaningless if it enables you to help someone else navigate similar pain. Your story becomes medicine for others. But here's something important. Passing the torch doesn't mean you bypass your own healing to focus on helping others. You can't give what you don't have. The most effective guides are people who've done their own work, who've processed their trauma, who've integrated their lessons, who've developed genuine wisdom rather than just collecting survival tactics. So continue your own growth, continue your own healing, and from that foundation, offer what you can to others. Sometimes passing the torch looks like formal mentorship. Sometimes it's just being honest about your struggles when someone asks how you're doing. Sometimes it's sharing your story publicly. Sometimes it's private conversations over coffee. There's no single right way to do it. The question is simply, are you willing to let your experience be useful to others? Or will you keep your survival story locked away where it can't benefit anyone? Many people resist sharing their struggles because they're ashamed. They think their crisis was evidence of personal failure. They don't want to be seen as weak or broken. But here's the truth. Your willingness to be vulnerable about what you've been through gives others permission to be vulnerable about what they're going through. Your honesty creates space for connection in places where isolation was creating unbearable suffering. When you share your story authentically, not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who's still figuring it out but has made progress, you become a beacon of hope. And that's what people in crisis need most. Not answers, not solutions, not platitudes. Hope. Evidence that survival is possible. Proof that the darkness doesn't last forever. You are that proof. The very fact that you're here reading this, having survived whatever brought you to this point, that's evidence that makes a difference to someone else who's still in the storm. Don't underestimate the power of your presence. Don't minimize the value of your journey. Don't hide your story because you think it's not inspiring enough or complete enough. Your story doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. And somewhere, someone needs to hear it. Chapter 15. Living Unshakable. We've covered a lot of ground together, from the initial shock of crisis to the wisdom that emerges on the other side, from learning to stay calm in the storm to becoming a source of calm for others. But now comes the real question. How do you maintain this unshakable presence as you move forward? How? Do you live from this place of centered strength in your daily life? Because here's the truth. Crisis won't be a one-time event in your life. Challenges will continue to arise. Storms will continue to come. The difference is that now you know how to navigate them. You've built the skills. You've developed the wisdom. You've discovered the inner fortress that no external circumstance can destroy. Living unshakable doesn't mean you'll never be tested again. It means you approach future tests with confidence rather than terror. It means when the next challenge arrives, and it will, you don't spiral into panic thinking, "I can't handle this." Instead, you draw on your reservoir of proven resilience and think, "I've been through hard things before. I can navigate this too." That shift in perspective changes everything. Living unshakable means you've internalized a few core truths that guide you through whatever arises. You know that circumstances are temporary. The good times won't last forever, so you savor them without clinging. The hard times won't last forever either, so you navigate them without despair. You know that your security comes from within. Your sense of well-being doesn't depend on having perfect circumstances. It comes from your relationship with yourself and your ability to respond wisely to whatever occurs. You know the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. You pour your energy into your circle of influence and accept everything outside that circle with peaceful surrender. You know how to regulate your emotions. You can feel intensely without being overwhelmed. You can honor your feelings without being controlled by them. You know how to stay present. When your mind tries to catastrophize about the future or ruminate about the past, you can bring yourself back to the now, where you actually have power. You know how to ask for help. You've released the belief that strength means handling everything alone. You understand that vulnerability is courage, not weakness. You know how to find meaning. Even in difficult circumstances, you can extract wisdom, growth, and purpose rather than just suffering. These aren't just concepts you understand intellectually. They're practices you've embodied through experience. And the more you practice them, the more automatic they become. The more automatic they become, the more unshakable you become. Living unshakable also means you've made peace with uncertainty. You no longer need to know exactly how everything will turn out before you can feel okay. You can move forward into unknown territory with courage because you trust yourself to handle whatever you encounter. This trust isn't naive optimism. It's earned confidence based on evidence. You've faced challenges before and survived them. You've navigated uncertainty before and found your way. You've been knocked down before and gotten back up. That track record becomes the foundation for moving forward without needing guarantees. Living unshakable means you've developed emotional sovereignty. Your inner state isn't completely dependent on external validation, other people's behavior, or circumstances being exactly as you prefer. You can maintain your center even when others are upset, even when you're facing criticism, even when your environment is chaotic. This doesn't make you cold or disconnected. It makes you capable of genuine connection without losing yourself in others' emotional states. You can be deeply empathetic without taking on others' suffering as your own. You can offer support without sacrificing your own well-being. You can love fully without becoming dependent on that love for your basic sense of okayness. Living unshakable also means you've cultivated gratitude for the journey, all of it. The crisis that brought you here, the pain that taught you, the breakdown that led to breakthrough, not because you enjoyed the suffering, but because you recognize that who you've become was forged in that fire. The wisdom you carry now, you couldn't have learned it any other way. The compassion you have for others, it came from experiencing your own struggles. The strength you embody now, it was built by surviving challenges you didn't think you could survive. Would you trade who you are now to avoid the crisis that shaped you? Most people, once they reach the other side, say no. Not because the crisis was enjoyable, but because the transformation was worth it. So as you move forward, carry this with you. You are capable of far more than you realize. You can handle challenges that would have destroyed the person you were before this journey. You've proven it to yourself, and that proof is unshakable. Conclusion. Your journey forward, if you're reading this, you're either in the middle of a storm or you're preparing for one that hasn't arrived yet. Either way, I want you to know something. You have everything you need to not just survive what's coming, but to be transformed by it. The tools are in your hands now. The wisdom has been shared. The path has been illuminated. Staying calm when life falls apart isn't about being emotionless or detached. It's about developing a centered presence that can fully engage with life's challenges while remaining anchored in something deeper. It's about discovering that within you lies a source of peace, strength, and wisdom that no external circumstance can touch. The journey won't be easy. There will be moments when you forget everything you've learned, moments when you fall back into old patterns of panic and resistance. That's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Each time you catch yourself spiraling and bring yourself back to center, you're building the muscle of unshakable calm. Each time you choose acceptance over resistance, presence over anxiety, vulnerability over pretense, you're strengthening your foundation. Each time you navigate challenge successfully, you're adding evidence to your internal database that you're capable of handling whatever life brings. And gradually, without you even noticing exactly when it happened, you become someone different. Someone who faces uncertainty with courage rather than terror. Someone who experiences intense emotions without being destroyed by them. Someone who can find meaning and growth even in the darkest circumstances. You become unshakable, not because life stops challenging you, but because you've developed the capacity to remain steady in the center of any storm. This is your birthright, this unshakable calm, this centered strength, this wise presence. It's not reserved for special people or spiritual masters or those who've never faced real hardship. It's available to you right now, in this moment. All you have to do is choose it, practice it, return to it again and again until it becomes your natural state. The storm will pass. It always does. But the person you become by learning to stand calm in the center of it, that person remains with you forever. That person is who you're becoming right now. Welcome to the other side of fear. Welcome to the depths of your own strength. Welcome to unshakable peace. The journey is just beginning.